Greetings, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our series focused on recruiting, hiring, and retaining educators of color, sponsored by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. I hope that folks had an opportunity to watch part 1 of this series because there was a lot of context setting we did in part 1 that I'm hoping to sort of skip over or glide through. On this one, the focus obviously for the webinar series is, as the title says, focusing on increasing educator diversity. And for this session, we are joined by Sharif El-Mekki, the founder and CEO of the Center for Black Educator Development. And so we're really looking forward on this session to hear about the center, to hear about even the evolution of the center in Pennsylvania with Sharif's work there. The goal for these webinars is to really provide Pennsylvania practitioners and particularly district level leadership and those in charge of teacher recruitment, hiring, retention with helpful information regarding strategies and innovative practices and tools and resources that will be meaningful and useful in their work to both recruit, hire, and also retain teachers of color. The objectives for the webinar series, again, focusing on increasing educator diversity. This one is part 2 of a 2-part series. And through these webinars, the idea, the objective is to share promising practices and strategies, as well as tools and resources. And I think more important than anything, provide an opportunity for practitioners and policymakers throughout the state and potentially throughout the country to get introduced to these leaders in this space. Part 1, we met leaders at the Connecticut State Department of Education. Today, we're going to get to meet Sharif more and talk about the work at the center. Again, just as a review, because this was discussed on the part 1, there is, this data is similar to what we see across the nation in states where the representation in the teacher workforce of people of color is much less than what we see among students, the student populations in states. Interesting to note in Pennsylvania, and I believe Sharif has a large part to play in this, is that we are seeing among first-year teachers, among new teachers in this state, greater diversity than in the general population of teachers, which indicates something is going on in Pennsylvania to contribute to that. And so hopefully something that other states and districts can learn from. The bottom line is that Pennsylvania is committed, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, to increasing the educator diversity in their state and are working very deliberately in a lot of different ways to do just that. So without further hesitation, I want to cue up my good friend and colleague, Sharif El-Mekki from the Center for Black Educator Development to talk to us about his work. Sharif, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, participate in this session. I think, you know, both from the initial session and this, I think they complement each other well and speak to the collective work that we're trying to do in Pennsylvania. So again, I'm the founder of the Center for Black Educator Development and a former teacher and principal, which I did for 26 years and only left my principal role to dive into this very specific nuanced work of diversification of our teacher workforce and our educator workforce. And so our mission is really looking at the recruitment, retention, and hiring of quality educators, and that they have a particular worldview, social political connection, and cultural, a shared background of students. We believe that that benefits diverse student population, which Pennsylvania and many places are starting to see an increase in. And our vision is that everybody has a diverse teacher body in their pre-K to 12th grade experience. We firmly believe that a diverse teacher workforce isn't just good for students of color, it is good for all students, white students included, and maybe even especially. And so we're broken up into like 4 categories. Like we stand on 4 pillars, right? You know, one of them is around the pathways to teaching. What does this pipeline look like, and how do we get more Black teachers, you know, both interested and successful in the teaching profession? We believe professional learning is for everybody, whether you are a teacher of color or not. The coaching, the mentoring, the professional learning, all of that is crucial at every phase of your career, whether you are an aspiring educator or you are an experienced veteran. And not just for teachers, but for those who are coaches and principal supervisors and even school board members, that there should always be this leadership development, this professional learning that's just ongoing. This idea of pedagogy and culturally relevant pedagogy, you hear this a lot, but one of the things that we've just noticed in auditing various courses, as well as the conversations and feedback that we receive from teachers, is that often this culturally responsiveness has not been there in the teacher training space, that many even professors in teacher colleges say like, hey, I wish I knew more about how to better prepare teachers. And when you look at the research around the country, many first-year teachers say, I'm just not prepared to teach Black and brown students. And so that can lead to ongoing deficits in the outcomes that our students deserve. And then policy, just really trying to advance and advocate for policies that support educational justice, which we believe is directly linked to racial and social justice. And so, I think one of the areas that really just wanted to speak to very specifically is around our pipeline. How do we encourage youth who are thinking about education? How do we, allow youth to explore if they have not thought about education? Myself, I was not an education major in undergrad. I knew I wanted to be an activist. I knew I wanted to give back to my community. I knew I was interested in social and racial justice. But it was a Black teacher named Dr. Martin Ryder who helped me make the connection between activism and racial and social justice to educational justice. He's the one that kind of helped me connect the dots and shared this passion that I had for activism, and allowing me to envision myself as a leader of a classroom with a level of self-efficacy, to be able to not only teach students, from a content expertise, but also marry it to, again, that socio-political connection and cultural awareness that I brought to the table. And so we're excited to use Freedom Schools Literacy Academy as a teacher apprenticeship program. Freedom Schools, you may have heard of it, is a long sustained program that was started through SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee down in Mississippi, as an alignment to the work that they were doing to get Black people registered to vote. And a man named Charlie Cobb wrote an essay to the SNCC leadership and said, hey, we think we should do something with youth as well. So again, civil rights, but connecting it to student outcomes, particularly Black student outcomes. And so what we wanted to do was build on the work of Charlie Cobb at SNCC, Marion Wright Edelman at the Children's Defense Fund, Philadelphia Freedom Schools, that has had a variation of Freedom Schools for 20 plus years, to say, like, suppose we married some of the things that we were trying to do, particularly around a teacher pipeline and this teacher apprenticeship, and marry that to the fundamentals of Freedom School, which is around literacy and positive racial identity. And if we have this intergenerational component, where there's our high school students and college students working together to teach literacy to first, second, and third graders, and if they are getting coached and mentored and support with their lesson plans and observed and given feedback, not only are they learning how to teach, but they are getting this robust training long before they even enter college. And so what we hope is that through Freedom School Literacy Academy, that this intergenerational modeling and teaching that students see it, not only the first, second, and third grade scholars who are experiencing it, but also the high school and the college students who are getting mentored and coached by our staff, really see this. And it's been wildly successful the past couple of years. We're fortunate to, to see that, 100% of the college students who've participated in the program are more interested in teaching than they were before. We've had several who joined teacher residencies around the state. And we are grateful that, again, Pennsylvania, with their vision, with their dedication to not only talking about it and thinking about the problem, but actually putting forth solutions. So the Aspire to Educate program was an initiative from the Pennsylvania Department of Education to help IHEs, nonprofits like ourselves to advance the ideas of addressing leaky pipeline, and so our approach to it has been working with aspiring educators and high school and college students, whether it's through dual enrollment, whether it's through freedom schools, and there's other components of supporting paraprofessionals as well as career changers. And so this is actually the 1-year anniversary of launching the Aspire to Educate program. And so really grateful to to be here to share the success so far.
That's wonderful. And congratulations. And thank you for giving us that overview, Sharif. So many questions come to mind that I would love to just put in front of you to share your ideas with us. The one that stands out for me right now, I'm going to go a little off script. I know I gave you some questions initially, but
Oh, no worries.
if you could tell the audience who will watch this about what I heard is that an important part of your strategies to increase educator diversity are also attending to culturally responsive teaching and leading. And so if you could talk a little bit about your philosophy, your beliefs about those two, the connections between those two, how they're related, I think that would be really great.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely, crucial, and this isn't, while it seems to be that the conversations are more expansive and more pervasive, it's not a new concept. We know that Gloria Ladson-Billings wrote in Dream Keepers and sharing experiences of effective Black teachers and why they were effective. When Lisa Delpez writes about other people's children, she talks about, these are people who are connected and finding ways to connect with the community. We see that new teachers who are maybe struggling. There's another group who say, who are struggling less. And first year teaching is hard, right? First 3 years of teaching is extremely hard, right? And you learn so much. But there's a group that if we, sometimes we have to study like what's working. And when we look at new teachers who are finding effectiveness, finding success, what they say is, I have a deeper connection to the community. And that's what helps mitigate some of the other challenges, right? Relationship building, understanding the context with which you are teaching, ensuring that there's a windows and mirrors philosophy embedded in your lesson planning. And a lot of people have heard about that, but just succinctly, windows is when Black students often only see the literature of white America or Europe, right? Everything that is taught by default from a white perspective, even if it's not said, this is the white perspective of World War I. It's just, that's the default. And a Black child from pre-K all the way through high school often say like, I only saw, white perspectives in everything I've learned. I've gone to science classes across 13 years and never saw, the contributions of Black and other scientists of color. And so that goes on and on and on times thousands and thousands of students' lives. And what that does is it internalize something where the white student gets the mirror constantly, the literature that's placed in front of them, the teacher that's leading the classroom, the person leading the school or the school board, what the quotes and the heroes that are plastered on the walls, all of these reinforce their own white identity. And so that also, undermines their ability to understand and work with and appreciate the various cultures that make up this country and that have built this country. And so that's just one small example of why cultural relevance, you know, as you, you know, used to talk about being learner ready, understanding who are the learners, how do we center them, and whose voices are missing when I'm teaching.
Yeah, that's right on. You know, and you talked about, you know, what I heard you talk about, Sharif, is the importance of culture, centering students' culture, not just for our kids, for students of
Mhm.
color, but for white students too. Um, and so that there's this great value in culturally responsive teaching and curriculum materials for every student, particularly when you think about where we are right now as a country.
Yeah, absolutely.
I started curious too, Sharif, like in relation to your work. I mean, you're focused on preparing, you know, like getting more teachers of color into the workforce and preparing them. Um, but we have a lot of this workforce that is still predominantly white. So I would love to hear about, you know, we're certainly not encouraging that we're pushing out white teachers, but what do we need to do in terms of better preparing, you know, our white teachers there to be culturally responsive, not just for their students, right, but for their colleagues of color that we're trying to recruit into these spaces. Would love to hear what you think about that.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, and I've heard a lot of people, you know, across districts, across the country, talking about like, you know, their commitment to recruiting more diverse teachers. But what I hear far less, unfortunately, is this idea is what are the prerequisites to retain those teachers that you've recruited? So if you have a goal of recruiting X amount of teachers, but you've not done the internal work of, of interrogating your biases, interrogating the racism that's built into the system, come into the, you know, discussing, you know, whether you even agree that there's inherent racist practices in your system. If you haven't done that type of work, but all you want to do is open the front door, that means you will not be able to retain, because as the people come through the front door, they're going to exit the back door. And the best recruitment strategy is really a very thorough, deeply anti-racist retention plan. And so understanding that and applying that is absolutely crucial. We've had so many teachers of color who give feedback that, you know what, I would have stayed if it was a less hostile environment. I would have stayed if more of my colleagues were not treating children that look like me in explicitly biased ways. I would have stayed longer if there was more anti-racism, and if people had the courage. You know, a lot of times adults are talking about safe spaces. What teachers of color are saying, like, we need more brave spaces where we see you interrogating your own racial biases and we're having conversations, and not expecting me as the sole, you know, black or brown teacher to solve all the systemic racial issues that I walked into, you know, when I was hired. And teachers of color are not looking for perfection. What they're looking for again is the bravery to say, here's our goal, here's where we are, we're being honest, and we're going to work on it. Right? Like
Mhm.
that's what teachers of color are looking for. They're not looking for perfection. That's not the expectation. But to acknowledge that there are racial biases, to acknowledge that these schools and systems were not initially created for with the thought of, you know, black and brown student success, and then understanding that any progress has been, you know, built on a foundation that was already fundamentally flawed, right? And so
Mhm.
we can't build a structure and the foundation is you know, just bricks and bricks of racism, and we add window dressings of professional development, you know, every once a quarter. That's not going to cut it. We don't need window dressings right now. You know, I often give the analogy of, too often schools are, instead of diving in at the roots of where things initiate, they're pruning the branches and saying, look at the progress. No, those branches will regrow. Those leaves that you pulled off from pruning a tree, you know, grown in you know, the manure of racism, is going to continue to flourish. You have to dive into the much harder work at the root level.
Mhm. Wow, that's really powerful. I always appreciate your metaphors that you bring
Yeah.
when you talk about this work. It's very helpful for people. I
When I
think
was
who are
a younger
struggling.
leader, they told me to get out of the sports and war analogies. So I've been trying to like think about them in different ways.
Well, you're doing a great job. You're absolutely doing a great job. Thank you so much. Sharif, I just want to close by asking you, this is sort of that typical question, but
Mhm.
you've given, I think, a lot of really good advice to people listening to this about, like what are some of these considerations from recruitment side, but also to the like the importance of retention and of cultural responsiveness and anti-racism. If you had a district leader on this webinar who's really like wide open to starting to take action, what might be one or two things you would tell them, like here's some advice for like how to get started right away?
Yeah.
Like what is the first one or two things they need to do to change that culture in their school?
Mhm. I think the first thing that we've been really encouraging district leaders, school leaders to do when they want to embark on this work is one. Too often when we look at people who are doing this work, people contract with us to, hey, can you come do professional development for teachers? And we often say like, that's great, but what are the leaders doing? What is your anti-racist work? What is your leadership development plan? What is your system of interrogation and learning and public learning? Like it starts with the leader, and people often they know that, inherently like, oh yeah, leadership, it starts at the top, or the vision starts at the top. But very often it is very teacher focused, which is, is important, right? Like they are the ones that are in front of our children, but it can't stop there. And so one of the first things I would ask is like, what are you doing? What is your public learning? How are you modeling the cultural humility, the cultural responsiveness, and how are you leading in this space, right? It's very easy to say, yep, I checked it off. I got all my teachers doing this work, but I'm not going to do it. And so that's either ego or just a gross miscalculation of what it actually takes to affect change. And it should be an all hands on deck, systemic, like the entire ecosystem should be, if we're saying like, oh, this is our rallying cry, this is how we want to address things, then it's all hands on deck. It is for everybody. It's not a rallying cry for the teachers to do it. It is a rallying cry for all of us, and particularly the leaders. And so I would say, if anything, it has to be teachers and leaders simultaneously and working together. And then you can add on different groups. But if anything, I would say start off with your own interrogation and figure out how are you included in the professional learning. And often we give feedback. People say like, "Oh, we want you to train our teachers," and we're saying that in itself is not enough. You train the teachers, but the principal or the principal supervisor has no clue, no idea, has spent no time going through the mental exercises and the reflections that the teachers are doing, then
Mhm.
it's not sustainable.
That's right. Yeah. I appreciate that so much. Thank you, Sharif, for your
Thank
time,
you.
for your
Thank you.
wisdom, and your insights from this, career of work that you've been doing, invested in. The state is very lucky to have you leading in this way, and so are all of the children that will benefit from this work. So I just, again, thank you and appreciate your time. And that'll be it for today. Until I see you again, friend.
Well, hopefully see you soon. And likewise, thanks for having me. I appreciate all the work that you continue to do in the space of equity and justice. And I'm, likewise grateful for, Pennsylvania Department of Education's leadership, both with Secretary Rivera and his team, and now transition to Dr. Noe Ortega, where they had this
Right.
vision and this commitment to not just talk the talk, right? Like to actually say like, hey, here are our next steps forward in implementing this change and setting a goal of, hey, we want to increase diversity by 2025 by 20%. That is a very different North Star than just saying like, hey, we have a problem. We can say we have a problem for the next 20 years, but it's very different than putting one step in front of the other and building coalitions to, as part of your team to address it. So we're grateful to be part of the team, part of the consortium in Pennsylvania to to do this work, and we see positive trends that we hope we can rapidly build on over the next several years.
That's
Thanks
right.
again
Well,
for
we'll
having me.
continue to keep watching. And
Okay.
Andrea, thank you, my colleague, also here, for all of your work to put this webinar together.
My pleasure. Thank you both.